When I was growing up, it was in a small mill town called Longview, Washington, and we had a public library there, and they had a children's book department that featured bathtubs that were carpeted. The carpeted bathtubs, as you can imagine, were coveted space by the children. So we would go in there, we would find our book, we would take, you know, whatever new book we were reading. For me, it was generally like The Great Brain, that sort of thing. And we would go, and if a bathtub was free, one of the carpeted ones, then we were the happiest people in the entire world. My dad, when I was about 10 years old, he told me that since I was done with all the Nancy Drew type stuff, that I should start reading the Sherlock Holmes mysteries. And I went down to the children's section of the same library, and I looked everywhere for the Sherlock Holmes mysteries. Couldn't find them, and I said to my favorite librarian, you know, honestly, and I'm 10 years old, I'm like, I don't give much credence to a library that doesn't have the Sherlock Holmes mysteries. I mean, I'm a kid and everyone's heard of Sherlock Holmes, and she said, sweetie, that's upstairs in the mezzanine adult fiction section, and that was when I moved upstairs. So I remember that as well. Libraries were really important to me as a child, and I spent a lot of time there. I mean, they foster my reading even now, because I think that, you know, I live in Manhattan, I live in a small apartment in Manhattan, and it's not always possible for you to buy the first hardcover, you know, that comes off the shelves. I think it's actually extremely classist of people to think that people can always just go out and buy books and then have the bookshelf space and then, you know, stick it on there. Sometimes what you need to do is you need to go to a library and you need a new type of fiction, you need to explore a different genre or a different author, and you need to be able to check it out, and you don't have the physical capacity to actually keep that book forever, but it fosters my reading today. It fostered my reading when I was a kid. I think it fosters reading everywhere. I practically work at the Bryant Park Research Library today in Manhattan because what I do is historical fiction, so very, very detailed historical fiction. And I spent 6 months minimum at the Bryant Park Research Library researching the novel that I'm about to be writing, and because of that, I think you know, I'm extraordinarily grateful for libraries, and you know, donate to the New York Public Library system every year, because if they didn't exist, my job would be extraordinarily difficult. I spend an enormous amount of time in their microfilm department. Where else would I find a microfilm department that has, you know, all these New York City periodicals? I find all the research in the rare book department that I could possibly need. I can request books from any other of the branch libraries, and they will deliver them to the one closest to me. I mean, the library system is amazing in New York, and the library system is amazing throughout the United States, and I would not be able to create books like this if not for the library system. Favorite librarian? Yes. It's still my childhood librarian, who told me very gently, Lindsay, Sherlock Holmes is not to be found in the children's section. Her name is Sandra. She was a great librarian, and she still lives in my hometown. I feel that library budget cuts are extremely counterintuitive, because if you have an economy in which people need to educate themselves into a position of finding gainful employment, and they need to have access to resources in order to gain employment in the first place, then cutting funds to libraries is extraordinarily counterintuitive, I think. You want the economy to increase, then you want people to be reading more. You want people to have access to the sort of, you know, resources that are going to enable them to get jobs, that are going to enable them to use email, to, you know, not everybody has this capacity, you know, just at home. So cutting library funding is not the way to bolster the economy. The way to bolster the economy is to keep your library system strong. So I think it's completely ridiculous, which is why, you know, when I can, I do donate to the library system. Banning and challenging books in libraries is a fascinating subject, because it's done often for the most ridiculous reasons, but then afterward it fosters so much conversation about the book that I almost find it fun. I don't know. I mean, for instance, here's a good example. So there's a lot of obvious examples. Huckleberry Finn, of course, has been, you know, banned at any number of places for its language. Meanwhile, it's one of the most beautiful and one of the most moral books in the entire English language, period. So the fact of it being banned is interesting, but then people talk more about it, and that conversation that the banning of the book fosters is amazing. I think banning books, of course, is a bad thing, but I think the conversation that happens after a book has been banned is really interesting. Neil Gaiman Simon, who's a fantastic author, his book Neverwhere was recently banned somewhere, I forget what region, but it was banned as pornography. And he said on Twitter, I feel terrible for all the people who are about to go out and buy Neverwhere, expecting pornography, who will be disappointed. This is Seven for a Secret. It's a sequel to the book called The Gods of Gotham. The Gods of Gotham, I was honored and lucky enough last year won the Codes RISA Award for mystery genre here at ALA, and that was amazing. Seven for a Secret is the sequel, and if you think about, I think the best way to explain it is Timothy Wilde is my detective, and he continues in this series. It's a trilogy. If you're familiar with the plot of 12 Years a Slave, this is essentially the other side of that coin, because in 12 Years a Slave, which is of course an autobiography that I studied extensively, and I was researching this at the Bryant Park Research Library 3 years before the film came out, and I had no idea that it was being made into a movie, so I'm delighted that more light is being shed on the subject. But Solomon Northrup's autobiography is about a man who has been kidnapped from New York and sold into slavery for 12 years, and it's an absolutely harrowing autobiography. This is about the New York Committee of Vigilance that free people of color formed in order to prevent that from happening. So Timothy Wilde, who's the same detective from The Gods of Gotham, joins up with the New York Committee of Vigilance in order to try to prevent black people from being sold south. And there is a murder and there is a mystery, and it is a thriller again, so that's what Seven for a Secret is all about.